Hello, my name is Mary Benavidez. I am a senior studying clinical psychology here at Adams State University, and I am pleased to share what I have learned about how obesity affects the structure and function of the brain. Why did I choose this topic? Well, this is me 10 years ago at my heaviest weight of 300 pounds. She is the inspiration for the original paper and this presentation. People have been concerned about becoming overweight throughout the ages. This was primarily due to obesity being viewed as a cultural deficit of weak character, inadequate nutrition, heredity, being poverty-stricken, and as a result of the sins of gluttony and sloth. In the classical Greek era, the physician Hippocrates' advice to lose weight included tips such as eat only one meal a day, sleep on a stone bed, and walk around naked as much as was feasible. Therefore, obesity is not a new occurrence and has been in and out of vogue throughout the centuries. Today, in most of the modern world, being overweight is viewed in a negative light culturally and medically. According to the World Health Organization, obesity has reached epidemic proportions globally. The most common way to determine if a person is overweight or obese is to calculate body mass index, better known as BMI. BMI is an estimate of body fat based on comparing a person's weight to his or her height. Someone is considered obese if their BMI is 30 or higher. As you can see in the map, more than 60% of the United States population fit the medical criteria for being overweight and or obese. More than 1 billion adults worldwide are overweight, and at least 300 million of them are categorized as clinically obese. Obesity is also a comorbidity of a greater mortality rate of individuals with heart disease, osteoarthritis, and other medical issues. In the United States, approximately 400,000 deaths occur each year due to obesity-related issues. In 2017, the Obesity Medical Association defined obesity as a chronic, relapsing, multifactorial neurobehavioral disease, wherein an increase in body fat promotes adipose tissue dysfunction and abnormal fat mass physical forces, resulting in adverse metabolic, biomechanical, and psychosocial health consequences. With this relatively new definition, obesity is now viewed in a neurobiological way. As this is a relatively new area of study, we are going to briefly explore a few factors that contribute to obesity, and then take a look at 3 recent studies which examine the connections between obesity and changes in the brain's gray and white matter volume and structure. Genetic, environmental, psychological, and other factors all may play a role in obesity, which occurs when a person's caloric intake exceeds the amount of energy he or she burns. Obesity tends to run in families, but since family members share diet and lifestyle habits as well as genes, identifying genetics as a sole cause may be difficult. Many people genetically predisposed to obesity do not become obese or manage to lose the weight and keep it off. Environmental factors include lifestyle behaviors, such as diet and activity levels. Many people eat in response to negative emotions, such as boredom, sadness, or anger. Most overweight people have no more psychological disturbance than normal weight people, but about 30% of people seeking treatment for serious weight problems have trouble with binge eating. Some illnesses can lead to overeating as well, as certain drugs may cause excessive weight gain. These other causes are believed to be responsible for only about 1% of all obesity cases. Even in an obesogenic environment, not everyone becomes obese. An obesogenic environment refers to the influences that the surroundings, opportunities, or conditions of life have on promoting obesity in individuals and populations. In other words, It is an environment which offers ready access to high-calorie foods, but limits opportunities for physical activity. Before the genomic research era, studies of family members, twins, and adoptees offered indirect scientific evidence that a sizable portion of the variation in weight among adults is due to genetic factors. For example, a key study that compared the BMI of twins reared either together or apart found that inherited factors had more influence than childhood environment. Rarely, obesity occurs in families according to a clear inheritance pattern caused by changes in a single gene. The most commonly implicated gene is MC4R, which encodes the melanocortin-4 receptor. Changes in MC4R that diminish its function are found in less than 5% of obese people in various ethnic groups. Affected children feel extremely hungry and become obese because of consistent overeating. So far, rare variants in at least 9 genes have been implicated in single gene or monogenetic obesity. In most obese people, no single genetic cause can be identified. Since 2006, genome-wide association studies have found more than 50 genes associated with obesity, most with very small effects. Several of these genes also have variants that are associated with monogenic obesity, a phenomenon that has been observed in many other common conditions. The brain regulates food intake by responding to signals received from adipose tissue, the pancreas, and the digestive tract. These signals are transmitted by hormones such as leptin, insulin, and ghrelin, and other small molecules. The brain coordinates these signals with other inputs and responds with instructions to the body, either to eat more and reduce energy use, or to do the opposite. Genes are the basis for the signals and responses that guide food intake, and small changes in these genes can affect their levels of activity. Some genes with variants that have been associated with obesity are listed in the table seen here. Energy is crucial to survival. Human energy regulation is primed to protect against weight loss rather than to control weight gain. The thrifty genotype hypothesis was proposed to help explain this observation. It suggests that the same genes that helped our ancestors survive occasional famines are now being challenged by environments in which food is plentiful year-round. In other words, through natural selection, we evolved to become efficient in food storage and utilization. Environmental exposures during critical periods of human development can cause permanent changes in a gene's activity without changing the sequence of the gene itself. Studying these epigenetic effects involves measuring chemical modifications of DNA, RNA, or associated proteins that influence gene expression. Although epigenetics might help explain how early exposures such as infant feeding influence adult obesity, epidemiological studies using these techniques are still at an early stage. The way communities, workplaces, and schools are structured in much of the United States has contributed to the country's high rate of obesity. Some of the changes seen in the past few decades include food, especially junk food, which is now sold in places such as gas stations and office supply stores that historically did not sell food. The end result is that food is available almost constantly. Food products and restaurants are marketed intensively on television, radio, online, and elsewhere. Many communities have no safe routes for walking or bicycling, or safe places to play outdoors. Most jobs present few opportunities for physical activity. Many schools provide little or no recess periods or gym classes. Poor neighborhoods are often food deserts with no purveyors of fresh, healthy foods. There are many television shows dedicated to food, restaurants, and cooking that show no regard for the health consequences of the food being featured. Stress contributes to obesity in a few ways. People who are stressed tend to make bad food choices and to eat too much. Stress causes the release of stress hormones, including cortisol, which triggers the release of triglycerides or fatty acids from storage and relocates them to fat cells deep in the abdomen. Cortisol also increases appetite. Other causes include medical conditions. A variety of medical conditions are associated with being overweight and obese, including Cushing's syndrome, which is a rare syndrome that results from excess production of cortisol by the adrenal glands. Eating disorders, especially binge eating disorders, bulimia nervosa, and night eating disorder. Growth hormone deficiency, hypogonadism, which is low testosterone, hypothyroidism, underactive thyroid, insulinoma, a tumor of the pancreas that secretes insulin, polycystic ovarian syndrome. In some cases, it is not clear whether obesity causes the medical condition or whether the condition causes obesity. Medications can contribute to obesity as well. Certain drugs have been shown to encourage weight gain, often by increasing appetite, and contribute to obesity. These drugs include diabetes drugs, including insulin, or otherwise known as Actos and Avanda, and sulfonylureas, glimepiride, glycopide, and glyburide. Drugs for high blood pressure, including diuretics, loop diuretics, calcium channel blockers, beta blockers, and alpha-adrenergic blockers. Antihistamines used for allergies. Steroids, including corticosteroids and birth control pills. Psychotherapeutic medication, including lithium, antipsychotics, and antidepressants. Anticonvulsant drugs used in epilepsy and some other conditions, such as sodium valproate and carbamazepine. Now we are going to discuss 3 recent studies focusing on current research utilizing MRI, Fmri, and TFMRI imaging, which examine the connections between obesity and changes in the brain's gray and white matter volume and structure. Our first study was conducted by an international group of researchers led by Dr. Augusty and examined how obesity is linked with a greater risk of anxiety and depression. Their purpose was to help identify and reduce associated neurological complications linked to obesity. This research examined removal of the HPA axis with an excess of glucocorticoids, changes in the neurotransmitters, short-chain fatty acids, and stimulation of an environment that can cause neuroinflammation. This in turn contributes to the production and regulation of host neurotransmitter levels and their receptors. The team also investigated how obesity could factor into behavioral changes and be partially responsible for cognitive impairment. In the critical phase of neuroplasticity and neurological development within childhood and adolescence, obesity could have even a greater effect. The researchers believe this is due to having adverse experiences that can change attitudes and behaviors, brain activity, and state of mind within adulthood. In the next study conducted by Dr. Futi and Ms. Lubinsky, obesity and other related factors were examined to establish a link with significant atrophy throughout the brain. This is in part due to a decline of the neuronal fiber bundle length within the temporal lobe. Areas specifically sensitive to obesity-connected degeneration include the cingulate gyrus, frontal lobes, and the hippocampus. Tissue volume in the brain decreased by approximately 2.4% in obese participants in comparison to individuals whose BMI fell in the normal range. This reduction in volume is associated with decreased performance on cognitive testing, as seen in participants' images on an fMRI. The considerable volume reduction associated with a high BMI is a cause for concern, but fortunately, evidence suggests that these effects may not be permanent. It is believed that this reduction can be turned around over time by losing enough weight to no longer be obese by exercise and diet modification. This can potentially lower the risk of dementia in elderly individuals who have a comorbidity of midlife obesity. In September 2018, the British Journal of Radiology published a review by Mrs. Marcondides and Dr. Batterham, which explored the effects of obesity and subsequent weight loss on the central nervous system's regions that control eating patterns. It also looked at the biological factors of these changes, which could lead to better weight loss strategies, which will improve overall physical and mental well-being. This slide shows one of the participants' brain fMRI. The imaging and other correlational discoveries led the researchers to have a greater understanding into obesity-related adjustments in brain reactions to food cues and has led to an increase in knowledge of the biological and behavioral reasons that contribute to overeating and obesity. This chart illustrates that eating patterns are controlled by a complicated system of homeostatic, reward, and areas with the central nervous system that collaborate with the need for energy regulation, the individual's environment, as well as their genetic makeup. In the Obesity and Macchiarini studies, environment and genetics were identified as correlational factors in the obesity epidemic. Environmental factors refer to things like the type and amount of food you eat, as well as physical activity levels. Dr. Batterham, in particular, investigated various genes, including the fat mass and obesity-associated genes FTO and MC4R. These have been connected to a greater chance of obesity. She noted, FTO stimulates food intake, while MC4R encodes the melanocortin-4 receptor. The MC4R gene, when bound by alpha-melanocyte stimulating hormone, bolsters appetite. Thus, there are many environmental and genetic factors which influence obesity. This, in part, may produce the neurobiological damage in the structure and impaired cognitive function within the brain. Conducting further research in this field could lead to better weight loss strategies that might reverse the effects of neurological impairments due to obesity. Remember my picture from the beginning of this presentation? 2011 me knew all about the medical issues associated with obesity, but it wasn't until I embraced my fear that I chose to make the decision to lose weight. And this is me now. Still overweight, but when I discovered last year obesity can cause neurological changes, I decided to renew my weight loss effort and readopted a healthier lifestyle. I want to do everything possible to have a healthy body and mind as I age. I would like to express my appreciation to Dr. Gina Mitchell, who helped make this presentation possible. I am grateful for this opportunity to present to you and for your attention today. Thank you.